Morning, honorable members. It has gone 8 o'clock, and I would like us to start the meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts of the Provincial Legislature of the Western Cape. This is the meeting for purposes of considering the annual report of the Department of Education, as well as to also look at the report of the Auditor General that has been submitted. Now, this meeting is held in terms of the rules of the virtual rules that has been adopted by Provincial Parliament. So this is a virtual meeting of the Standing Committee of Public Accounts. So the rules that are applicable to the virtual meetings are applicable. This meeting is going to be in two parts. The first part is going to be an in-committee meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Account together with the Auditor General. This is an in-committee meeting, and therefore it's confidential, and only members of the committee as well as members of the legislature, of the provincial legislature, are allowed to attend the meeting. Now, the information has been communicated as such that it is a confidential meeting. So people that are not allowed to attend, they will therefore not be excluded from the meeting. Now, before we may then continue, I will just like to check with the procedural officer. Are there any apologies that we have received?
Chairperson, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Chairperson, no apologies has been received, Chair.
Okay, then in the absence of apologies, then can I just get an indication then of the members that are present? If members can just introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chair. Member Hlodi Maseko.
Thank you very much, Honorable Maseko.
Good morning, Chair. Member Brankais.
Thank you very much, Honorable Brankais.
Morning, Chairperson Khalid Syed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member Syed.
Good morning, Chair. Lorraine Botha.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member Botha.
Morning, Chair. Member Bartman.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bartman.
Good morning, Chairperson Regan Allen.
Thank you very much, Honorable Allen. Now, having done those introduction, Mr. Davis, can I also get an indication that is the Auditor General already available? Are they present?
Yes, Chairperson. Yes, the Auditor General and the Audit Committee members are also in the meeting, Chair, and they're ready with their presentations.
Okay. No, then what I'll do then is that I'm going to hand over to the Auditor General. They don't necessarily have to introduce everybody that is present. Maybe the members as and when as they are going to speak, they can just introduce themselves. And I also, maybe for purposes of ease of communication, I'm going to switch off the video when I'm not speaking, so that we can actually allow ease of communication as well. And I will just also indicate, I will just request members to also do the same. Those who, if they can put their video on when they speak, and then maybe when we are not speaking, if we can just put that off. Now I'm going to hand over to the Auditor General's team.
Good morning, Chairperson, members of the committee, Audit Committee members and officials. With me today, Chair, I've got Ashley Orkert, Adil Blau, Sebulon Africa, Tsepo and Gavin van der Wiffen for this briefing today. So I'm going to give over to Audio Blau that will be taking us through the briefing. But before he does that, Chairperson, because this is the first meeting, Honourable Chairperson, I thought it was just important also to give some background of how the audit process has transpired during this 1920 year in the COVID-19 environment. Now, when we started with the departments in January 2020, I think we didn't anticipate that the audit process will be like this, taking into account then we were faced with the pandemic, COVID-19, where this announcement was made in March, and we had to work virtually as a result of, and as a result of that, we had to find different ways and means from our office, looking at scoping of the audit, looking at alternative audit procedures for us in order for us to confirm account balances in order for us then to give the appropriate audit conclusions and audit opinion. I must indicate that during this time there was good collaboration between us and the various departments and entities to work around the process, because at one point in time also there was only limited staff members available from the officials and from our side in terms of being office bound. So I think we found quite good ways of working around it. And as a result, I think, Chairperson, we're sitting in this process where the audit outcomes has been finalized now for the 1920 financial year. So I thought it was just important to indicate that background and also just to indicate that we are satisfied from our side that we've concluded appropriately on our audit outcomes and opinions. I think for the purpose of this meeting, the documents has been shared, Chairperson. So I'm going to ask the Senior Manager, Adil, maybe just to immediately go into the audit outcome, which is the most important part, that's part of the audit report, and then we can allow sufficient time if the honourable members have specific questions, Chairperson. So I'm handing over to Adil Blau that will take us through the briefing document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Sharon. Okay, Gavin is sharing it. So if we can just go to page 2 of the document. Okay, so this document deals with an introduction, deals with the audit opinion history. Then page 3 deals with the, page 4 deals with the key focus areas. Then we'll touch on some of the resolutions, or at least where to find those resolutions, and then also present some of the emerging risks for the department. So if we can just go further then down. The next page, page 3, just deals with the introduction. The Auditor General of South Africa has a constitutional mandate as a supreme audit institution, enabling oversight, accountability, and governance in the public sector through auditing, thereby building public confidence. So our aim today is to achieve this mandate. The purpose of this document or this briefing is to provide an executive summary of the audit outcomes of the financial audit, the audit of the performance information, and compliance with the legislation of the Western Cape Education Department for the 1920 financial year. If we can just go into the next page, Gavin. Okay, the next page just deals with the organizational structure of the Department of Education. This information is also available in the annual report, as well as the funding. On page 2, we can see that the department managed to spend almost all of its funds, with just less than 1% underspending. You can go to the audit outcome, Karen, which is on the next page. This table with its legends depicts the history of the audit outcomes for the last 3 years. So we can see that once again the department has achieved an unqualified audit report on the financial statements. There are, however, findings in the area of predetermined objectives, as was similar to the previous year. And there are no findings on compliance with legislation. Bottom of the page, we're just highlighting some matters to the users in terms of an emphasis of matter. The department restated some of its financial figures, which can be found on page 254 of the annual report. The department has also made an assessment of the impact of COVID-19 on the 1920 financial statement, and in this assessment, they concluded that no further reporting is required, and my opinion is not modified in terms of this matter that they've reported. Then the next section just deals with the additional matters, and here the auditor just highlights which pages in the financial statements were not subjected to audit procedures. Then on the key focus areas, once again, in the compliance focus area, we have no material audit findings. Then on the predetermined objectives, this is the area where we have reported findings, and we'll go into detail now into them. So I've evaluated the usefulness and reliability of the reported information in accordance with the criteria developed from the performance and reporting framework as defined in the general notice for selected programs presented in the annual report of the department for the 31 March 2020. The program selected was Program 2, which can be found on pages 73 to 79 of the annual report. I performed procedures to determine whether the reported performance was properly presented and whether performance was consistent, and approved performance planning documents. I performed further procedures to determine whether the indicators and related targets were measurable and relevant, and assess the reliability and the reported performance information to determine whether it was valid, accurate, and complete. The material findings in respect of the usefulness and reliability of the programs are as follows. We can go to the next page. So for Program 2, PPM 216, which is the percentage of learners provided with the required textbooks in all grades, in all subjects per annum, the planned target of 99.8% for this indicator was not specific in clearly identifying the nature and the required level of performance. For PPM 213, the percentage of Funza Lushaka bursary holders placed in schools within 6 months upon completion of their studies and upon confirmation that the bursar has completed their studies. I was unable to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence for the achievement of 8.49% as reported against the target of 65% in the annual report due to the lack of accurate and complete records. I was unable to confirm the reported achievement by alternative means. Consequently, I was unable to determine whether any adjustments were required to the reported achievement. Then, under various indicators, the achievement reported in the annual report differed materially from the supporting evidence provided for the indicators listed below, and those discrepancies were found in the percentage of learners provided with the required textbooks in all grades and in all subjects per annum, as well as the learner absenteeism rate reported at 5.73%. Other matters relating to predetermined objectives, I draw attention to the following matters. Program 1, teacher absenteeism not reliable. The performance indicator previously included in Program 2 was included under Program 1, administration for the year under review, which was not selected for audit in 2019-20. The performance reported against the planned target in teachers during the performance reported against the planned target in the previous year materially differed from the supporting evidence, as the leave taken by teachers during the previous year was not recorded or included as part of the reported performance. Due to the relevance of the and the importance of this indicator to the education sector, the 1920 audit also included a confirmation of whether the processes had improved to address the weaknesses previously identified. These matters were, however, not addressed, and as a result, the reported achievement of 3.95%, as included on page 50 in the annual report, is not reliable. Achievement of planned targets. Members can refer to pages 73 to 79 for the information on the reported planned targets for the year and explanations provided for the under and overachievement of a number of targets. Then adjustments of material misstatements. Identified material misstatements in the annual performance report submitted for auditing. These material misstatements were in the reported performance information program 2. As management subsequently corrected only some of the misstatements, I raised material findings on the usefulness and reliability of the reported information. Those that were not corrected are reported above. The internal control deficiencies identified. These were I considered internal control deficiencies relevant to the audit of the financial statements, reported information, and compliance with applicable legislation. My objective was not to express an opinion or assurance on it. The matters reported below are limited to the significant control deficiencies that resulted in the findings on the Western Cape's education performance report in this report. Management did not have appropriate record-keeping processes in place to ensure that the reported performance was supported by credible supporting evidence. The method of calculation for PPM 216, which measures the percentage of learners receiving the required textbooks, was amended in the current year by the relevant authorities without adequately considering the performance management and framework prescripts relating to the predetermined objectives, which resulted in the indicator not being well defined. The implementation of the action plan to address the repeat findings on predetermined objectives was not adequate to prevent misstatements in the performance report. Then point 4 deals with the scope resolutions, which can be found on pages 140 to 142 of the department's annual report, which details the feedback on the resolutions or matters of concern included or raised in the prior year's report of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. The next section just deals with some of the emerging risks. Here we've just highlighted firstly, new accounting pronouncements in the modified cash standards, which the first one is the componentization of assets. The effective date has not yet been determined for this. Then new modified cash standards chapters issued. Here we're just highlighting in the table which standards are and when they become effective, and the department is encouraged to early adopt those if applicable to them. Then new legislation, the Treasury regulations are currently being revised, which may introduce a number of new requirements once effective. Then also we draw attention to the requirement of paragraph 8.4, which requires the accounting officer to invite as many suppliers as possible and select preferred supplier using competitive bid committee system when deviating from normal bidding processes. This requirement may be scoped for the next audit cycle and could lead to non-compliance and reported irregular expenditure. Adjustments to scope in the 1920 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As Sharon mentioned earlier, areas and subject matters that were scoped out of the audit as a result of the impact on the audit process, as detailed in our engagement letter to the department, may be scoped in again for the 2021 audit. This includes areas in the audit of predetermined objectives, areas in the audit of compliance with legislation, including transfer of funds, revenue management, and asset management. Then lastly, audit findings on the annual report that may impact the audit opinion in the future. And here we're just highlighting the area of presentation and disclosure and relevance and completeness of that relevant indicators, which could find their way to the material for the audit report in the future with regard to the reporting framework. Thank you, members.
Thanks very much for the presentation. I would like just to get an indication from members. Are there any questions from members that they would like to have a clarification on? I can see Honorable Bartman and see Honorable Maseko, Honorable Said. Just before maybe the members can start, I just want to get an indication from members. I think is there any member who's got the document I think the document has just been presented now in front of us. And I don't think there's any member or Mr. Davids who has received it beforehand.
Chairperson, yes, this document has been emailed last week to the members, Chair, of the committee, and as well this morning for the members of the Standing Committee on Education.
No, sure. Thanks very much. I think let's start. Honorable Partman, Honorable Maseko, Honorable Said, Honorable Nkondlo, and Honorable Mare in that order. I see Honorable Bota is also coming in. Okay. Can we do that in that order, honorable members?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, may I ask my question?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, while this question is for the Auditor General, it is also a question for the Audit Committee and the department a little bit later when they're online. I will mention the page numbers, but please just bear with me because there's an issue in this audit report that's on multiple page numbers, but I will mention their numbers. Okay. So in the current audit report on page 5, okay, obviously one of the material matters that were identified were the percentage of learners provided with required textbooks in all grades and in all subjects per annum. Now, the target for the department was 99.8%, okay. But then the Auditor General goes on to indicate that the indicator is not specific in clearly identifying the nature and required level of performance, okay. And I just want to know what that means because last year, in last year's audit report, also on page 5, the indicator had a different number. It was indicated 218 previously. It's now indicated 216. And last year, the audit report said that they were unable to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. But it seems as if the target was fine last year, obviously, and we know that the target obviously changed. Then, on the same topic, in footnote 37 of page 79 in this year's annual report. Okay, so let me get the annual report related to the same topic that the Auditor General is referring to. On footnote 37, it reads, and I quote from the department, the actual achievement in prior years were based on all learners compared to the current year achievement, which reflects a sample of learners who received textbooks. Okay, so I don't have a problem with that because in terms of general audit reports across departments, across entities, it is also general practice for the Auditor General also to use samples to check financial statements, for example. Similarly, on page 132 of the annual report, let me just get to the page. Also relating to textbooks, the department writes, and I quote, reports were captured online using CEMIS, thus enabled the WCED to keep abreast of and respond rapidly to school level matters such as the delivery of textbooks. This tool was used to monitor key compliance and functionality items monitored by the circuit managers, thus extending accountability. Okay, then when you go back to page 79 on the annual report relating to this matter, let's get to page 79 again. In the comment on PPM 216, it says the data is sample based and changed from prior year where textbook orders and delivery was used. Similar to the footnote, they just indicate simply a sample is used, similar to, for example, how Auditor General also does auditing. Now, my question is, why is the target unclear? Because last year, and I have the audit report with me and the notes that I made of some of the questions members asked, and last year specifically, let me just get to the page. Member Botha actually asked a question about this particular indicator, and I quote what she asked. There might be one or two words that I'm paraphrasing, but this is what I wrote down in terms of what she asked. She asked, when you discuss control issues with management, are they aware of the indicators? And do you speak to them essentially about what they are supposed to achieve? And similarly, Member Said asked if you speak to the department regarding what you need to prove the indicators. And I quote the answers that were given by the Auditor General last year. Quote, they were fully aware of the discrepancies. Another quote, will revisit how they collect info. And quote, not always practical to get info when requested. Then, on the audit committee report, which you have sent for us for this year, on page 5, at 3.8, at the predetermined objectives, and I'll ask the same question to the audit committee and the department later, it speaks to the fact that there has been continuous monitoring of indicators on a quarterly basis. So essentially, there's confirmation that the Auditor General and the Department and Audit Committee meets regularly to discuss these matters. And in the APP, the Annual Performance Plan, on pages 78 to the change, it speaks to the change in the same indicator going forward. So now my question is, one, isn't the same method when it comes to sampling used by the Auditor General to look at financial statements? And why is this not okay for the department to use to prove this indicator, but it's okay for the Auditor General to use? Then my second question on this matter is, if the indicator changes like it did for this year, what was the engagements with the Audit Committee and the department? Because there have been engagements, and surely it's not something that you pick up at the end of the year that you feel that the proof for the indicator is not there. And then finally, given that this indicator is going to change again, is it a predetermined outcome that the department will receive the same audit report, essentially outcome next year, given that there's no agreement as to prove the indicator? I do have other questions, Chair, but given that this is my most important one and it's quite long and lengthy, I'm going to leave that there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member, for your understanding. But also, Honorable Members, what I'm going to do, I'm going to allow all of you to ask your question. Hopefully, the Auditor General is noting that down, and then we get a response after all of you have actually raised your questions. Now, the next person will be Honorable Maseko.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think Member Batman already has covered me with the question. Just to conceptualize the the audit opinion. I just want to find out from the Auditor General, the department on the audit opinion history. That means there was no improvement from the last financial year because it received the unqualified with findings on the predetermined objectives and or compliance. So am I correct to say that there was no any improvement at all? And also if maybe they can help me out, because that is one thing that I take it that there is an engagement that happens throughout the financial year. And if this is still appearing, the same problem that happened in the last financial year is still, the deficiency is still present in this financial year, that means it wasn't taken into consideration from the department to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And I want to also, when we engage with the the audit committee briefing, after we receive that, I will ask the same thing, because I also, my understanding is that that engagement is there. So if I can get, just to get to conceptualize it, to understand that if what I'm thinking is the truth, I will appreciate that. And also to hear if the engagement has happened and discussion was taking place about this issue, and what was the outcome when the engagement between the Auditor General to explain the audit finding for the last financial year to sort of create the improvement for this year. What were the results? What were the engagements all about when addressing this issue? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Honorable Maseko. Honorable Said.
Chair, thank you very much, Chair. I think I'm largely covered by Member Bartman, but I just think and I'll pose this question also to the department. In Part E of the annual report. Now I know we're looking at the note, but I think it speaks to the annual report as well. Part E, note 19, page 190. It speaks about these material findings and the usefulness and reliability of the selected programs. I just wanted to know what is the reaction by the Auditor General to the stance by the internal audit committee that these findings are due to the Auditor General's limited scope of work, because that is cited there. I just wanted to get a sense as to what's the response in that regard. Then also, note 22 on the same page speaks about the achievements reported in the annual performance report materially differed from the supporting evidence provided, which was now spoken about. Just wanted to also get a sense, given that this is not the first time that these material findings were made, what is the remedial action that the Auditor General would want the committee to possibly talk about? Because this is now, I mean, like the second time, you know. Then also, page 191, note 24, the last sentence, it says, these matters were, however, not addressed, and as a result, the reported achievement of 3.95%, as included on page 50 in the annual performance report, is not reliable. Are there any recommendations that can be given to the committee? Basically, what action can the standing committee take to assist the work of the Auditor General against those who are repeated offenders? Because clearly this is. Then my final question on page 192, note 34. It states that management did not have the record keeping processes in place to ensure that reported performance information was supported by credible supporting evidence. You've made this point. Has the Auditor General made recommendations? It's very important because it's the second time, and it speaks to some of the points that were raised. Has the Auditor General made recommendations on how to improve these to the WCED, and what was their reaction there too? And possibly I'm also going to ask WCED that question later on. Thank you.
Thanks, Honorable Said. Honorable members, I must say you give me hope when you say that the other members already asked the question. I expect that we are not going. Then I see members start continuing again. I thought maybe we are going to be short. But anyway, Honorable Nkonjo.
No, thank you, Chairperson, and compliments of the new season to all honorable members and my colleagues, and also to the AG's office and team in 2021. Chair, I don't want to seem like I'm also singing to the song, but yes, the question is related to both what Honorable Batman and Honorable Syed raised. Because I think what I wanted to understand actually is the historical trend on the specific matter, the one that the finding on the PDO is on. And it is, I think, a confirmation that this is not a new matter, it is a historic matter. And now I would want to understand that linked to that question that Honorable Batman and Syed has made, that obviously, would I be correct to assume that this would have fallen as part of the management letter or management issues that the AG would have shared with the department for the past financial year, and the year that we are dealing its audit on? And what has been the response? I think the area member Syed raised, where are the difficulties of the department to sort of improve on this particular area? So that is one, that's my just angle on the question, Chair. And then secondly, Chair, in as far as this particular indicator is concerned, or indicators of a similar nature, I just want to understand, because I think having sat in this parliament for the period that I've been, and even in the half of the last administration, I've always had concerns about, the issue of indicators, how they are put together. I just want, and this is just a general opinion from the Auditor General, particularly on issues of indicator, and the evidence that actually, helps, to confirm the performance of the department. I'm saying, using this particular example, is this something that is a challenge, of this department? And if so, what exactly are the underlying challenges that are actually getting this particular department to this problem? Because one would want to understand, I think, as the oversight arm, how do we improve? Obviously, when we get, to the department putting together its annual plans. So that's why I'm asking, what exactly are the issues around, appropriate and relevant evidence, which is linked to the indicator for this particular department? And maybe one would ask this question for all the other departments, so that we do not find this repetition, in terms of audit reports. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks, Honorable Kondlo. Honorable Mare.
Thank you, Chairman. I came in a few minutes late when you already started, but I did pick up something, and I think it relates to the questions asked by honourable members, by Bartman and Syed. I heard the Auditor General saying that there are certain internal audit deficiencies, but then adding that he was advised not to comment on it. I would just like to know, the audit, internal audit deficiencies that was picked up, does it relate to the questions asked by honourable members? And why did the Auditor General say that they were advised not to comment on it? I'd just like to get that cleared up, please.
Thanks very much, Honourable.
the department providing guidance, advice, and strategic effective internal control. I just wanted to get a sense as to what are some of the internal control deficiencies that the department has identified that they have resolved. Also, what is the department's reaction and way forward on the findings made by the AG on page 192 of the report? And also, what work is being done to address the findings by the Auditor General of the issue of inconsistency in the collation and reliability of the information on textbooks and on learners not attending classes? Then on page 132, in the second paragraph, speaks about quality of teaching and learning and educator development. I just wanted to know what are some of the challenges to the quality of teaching and learning at schools, and how were they resolved? Then page 133, Enterprise Risk Management Committee comprises of selected members of WCD senior management team, that section. I just wanted to know whether the committee plays any role in the... No, okay, it's fine, leave that. I'm not, that matter has been dealt with last year already. The other aspect on page 135, key emerging risks for the following financial year. It speaks about the key emerging risks that the department will have to consider in the next financial year relating to the COVID pandemic, with an internal and external focus. Our schools, I just wanted to get a sense as to the plans that are in place now, and I don't want to get into the meat of the issue in this meeting about the latest Auditor General's report on the procurement around the PPEs and the sanitizers and the quality. I think that's a discussion maybe for another day, but I just wanted to get a sense as to, maybe briefly, what measures does the department have in place to ensure that we don't have those kind of findings again? But I think maybe we can go into more details into another meeting, but if the department can just go into that. And also, if the sanitizers that are going to be used this year and the PPEs, is it going to be provided again, or will learners now need to purchase? I just wondered, because there has been this rumor in the public domain, and I think we want to dispel that. Then in terms of the cases on page 138, what are the details of the cases that were reported and which have now been closed, and how were they closed? And especially, what are the details of those cases that were forwarded to the South African Police Services? Then on page 140, the Auditor General was not able to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence for the reported achievements of the target. Is my understanding correct when I say then that because the WCD speaks, and I've raised this question with the Auditor General, the WCD speaks about the fact that this is due to the scope of the Auditor General being limited. I just wanted to get a sense whether that is the case, and why would that particular comment be made there. I think, okay, my last question here on page 142, prior modifications to the audit report. There's a table there. I just wanted to get a sense, so given the progress update on these aspects, and I just wanted to know what work has been done so far in terms of the progress update on the indicators. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Honorable Said. Honorable Bartman.
Thank you, Chairperson. And as indicated previously, I'm going to be asking a similar question to what I've asked the Auditor General. And firstly, I would like to say well done to the Minister and the HOD and the department, being able to get the achievement of underspending of less than 1% in a department such as education compared to the national benchmark, which is 2% of underspending, is quite an achievement. I think it's something that they can be very proud of. The question I have relates to the audit finding on the reliability and the usefulness of textbooks. And as I've mentioned previously to the Chair and to the Auditor General, please bear with me with the page numbers that I'll be mentioning because there are quite a few in different documents. Firstly, on page 5 of the audit report of this year, the finding regarding reliability and usefulness specifically mentioned that the plan target was not specific in clearly identifying the nature and required level of performance. In the 2019 audit report, the finding was simply that there was unable to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Okay. This year's plan target was 99.8%, and the actual target achieved was 94% based on page 79 of the annual report. Okay. On footnote 37 of page 79 of the annual report, it spoke about the actual achievement in prior years were based on all learners compared to the current year achievement, which reflects a sample of learners received textbooks. Okay. Further, on that same page, page 79, when you look at the little block with comment in the annual report, it speaks regarding the data is sample-based and changed from prior year where textbook orders and delivery was used. Now, when I asked the Auditor General why do they get to use samples when it comes to departments and entities, but the department is unable to do so, their answer was that the reason they can't use this particular measure is because they won't necessarily choose or end up with the same sample to measure, and that the particular indicator does not speak to the evidence or other way around that needs to be acquired. So on one hand, it says all books and all learners, but on the other hand, it says we're going to use a sample. Okay. Then the Auditor General said that they looked at controls in place and there were some controls not in place. Okay. I asked also whether there have been engagements with the department, because both the audit report and the internal audit committee report speaks about the engagements that were had and that recommendations were made. I have not yet received an answer as to what those recommendations were, even though I did ask, but I would like to ask now, what specifically were those recommendations? Because I would like to know, if I'm Deirdre and Deirdre is being told you're making coffee incorrectly, then someone needs to tell me how exactly the coffee needs to be made so that I can make it correctly in the future. So I would like to know, in terms of the recommendations, what specifically were the recommendations from the Auditor General? And perhaps this is also a question to the Audit Committee. Why were those specific recommendations not implemented? Because it is not 2 weeks before or 2 months before that an indicator is created. We know about the indicator for a year. And I've indicated also previously that you're going to be upset with me if I ask this question again next year, because we are not getting an answer as to how this particular indicator should be measured. So if I can please get an answer as to how should this indicator be measured so that next year we don't sit with the same problem. And then finally, Mr. I don't want to get your name incorrect, Mr. Africa from the Auditor General indicated that some targets, some indicators are set by the national department. And he also indicated that a question to the department could be that can indicators set at the national department be changed by the province? So obviously my question then now is this an indicator set by the national department? Because, for example, the learner absenteeism based on footnote 25 on page 75 says that the learner absenteeism indicator was changed due to DBE, but it doesn't say national or province. And then finally, I just want to know, with the measurement of this particular indicator, can the department, as well as the Auditor General, please take me step by step through what is the process that you undertake to check whether the indicator has been met? And Chair, again, I know perhaps I'm being tedious about this, but I feel that the answers are not being very specific, and I'm going to end up asking the same question and wasting people's time again next year if I don't understand specifically how this indicator should be measured. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Honorable Partman. Honorable Mare.
Chair, just a correction. I was before Member Marie.
Oh, no, thank you very much. Sorry, Honorable Potter. Is that is because I did not see your hand?
After you acknowledge me, I lowered my hand.
Okay. Okay, let's do that then. Honorable Potter, then we'll allow Honorable Mare.
Thank you very much. I have been covered by the two members before me. I just want to ask on page 138, I want to speak to the nature of those cases that remain open, if the department can elaborate on the roles and functions of those implicated in those cases. Thank you.
That is on page, you were saying which page, Honorable Member?
138.
138. Thanks very much, Honorable Potter. Honorable Mare.
I want to have a different angle to this problem. We are worrying about statistics here and methodologies, and we don't see the bigger picture on this platform. We are faced with tremendous problems here. We have an influx of people by the millions into the Western Cape, uncontrolled. The burden on the departments of education to provide schooling increases, and they don't have the funds. And we're not looking at that. We're looking at technicalities. Did you put the dot on the I or did you cross the T in the report? So I want to come back to it. We have a new narrative that's entered the discussions in this country. It's called, what is the new norm? And I want to ask the head of the Department of Education, what have you learned out of the COVID-19 pandemic? What have we learned? What must we change? With less funds and more responsibilities, how are you going to plan ahead, taking into account that your budgets are continuously cut, but millions of people are swarming into the Western Cape, demanding services, demanding schooling? What have you learned? Are we still going to rely on actual teachers being present at our schools, or are we going to go virtual? Is that the new norm? Or didn't you think about it? Are we still going to worry about getting books to each student a book? Or are we going to say you log into that and that app and then you will get your whole book online? What is the thinking in the department? I think we as a committee, I'm not a member of this committee, but I am an interested partner to what's happening. And I don't hear any questions of this nature being asked. We're trying to catch the department out on technical points, and we don't see the bigger picture. Where are we heading? Where are we heading with more students, greater demand, less funds, and COVID in the background? Mr. Schreeder, can you tell me what is your new norm? Take out your crystal ball and tell me, what do you see? What innovations can you bring about to let us be able to cope with less money, more people, as demanded by the 21st, the 2021? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mare. Can I hand over to the department? Honorable Minister or HOD?
Yes, I think I'm going to ask my HOD to hand over to the relevant officials to answer those because they're very specific. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair, Minister. Thank you also to the members for the questions that started off. They're wide-ranging and across all. And I think Member Murray has also indicated a good understanding around the challenges that the department faces, but I also recognize, of course, that in the context of this engagement, which is around about finances, etc., I want to start off by saying that a lot of the challenge that we face, and we must understand it in South Africa as well, is where there is a dire need to up the quality of education delivery for all the learners in the country, particularly learners from poor and disadvantaged communities, because it's not so yet. Our education outcomes across the country remain challenging. We, of course, proud in the Western Cape that we are performing of the best, and all indicators indicate that. But that's not a reason for complacency, because it's not just about the Western Cape. It's about South African youth and the education for the future and building for the future, and also recognizing our future focus. And so we gladly deal with these issues because we need to also recognize that the game has to be up. What the Department for, or the Section for Monitoring and Evaluation in the Presidency started a number of years ago with the inclusion of the predetermined objectives, if you like, is to try to get departments to deliver and to be measured on certain delivery aspects. So it's a signal. It's signaling to try to get everyone to strive to improve on those indicators. Now, the challenge with that is, no challenge with the principle. The challenge is that it's then left to the Department of Basic Education nationally to define these outcomes for education and to write the definitions in. And like many things in an audit year, when the audit report is dealt with, I mean, we're dealing with SCOPA now for the 1920 year in January 2021. And the AG is starting to again audit on the previous year. And the audit report is received July or August. So half the year is gone by the time the department gets the audit report and needs to then put in place the amendments that can have impact the next year. It's a very short time for a large and complex department such as an education department. I'm going to ask certain officials to respond to certain of these issues, and I just want to designate that, if you will allow me, Chair, because they've been all over the show, and then I'll kick off with certain comments, and then I'll ask colleagues to come in. The issue about the internal control deficiencies, I will speak to, and my colleagues can augment, and also the way in which we address it. And I must say the questions have been so wide-ranging that I might have forgotten part of the detail of the original questions, and Chair, I'd ask that the members then just refresh my memory if I'm not covering it adequately. I'll speak to the quality of teaching and learning and a number of the challenges resolved in that space as well. I just want to say that as far as the emerging risks are concerned, and what measures are in place, what are the plans for this coming year, I'll speak to broadly in that regard, and also on the matter of sanitizers for this year. When it comes to the details of caseloads on page 138, I'm going to ask Mr. Eli to comment, but please remember, Mr. Eli, that this is an open forum, and many of these cases are still under investigation, particularly the open cases. Those that have been handed to the police service, if you are able to give those details, please do. Colleagues, where we're unable to give the kinds of details that are asked for, we'll report that to the committee in writing subsequently. I'm not sure that we have all the details of every single one of the issues that are raised in the caseload, but the conversation, I think, around the cases are important, which the PFS has dealt with. The PFS, I'm not sure where the standing committee has a conversation with the PFS, but the PFS could also be asked to comment on those cases which they had dealt with. But I'll ask Mr. Eli to comment on that issue. He can also comment on the scope of limitation around textbooks. But I am, and also the comments on the prior modifications and the progress made. On the question on page 142 that Member Sayed raised about the prior modifications and the progress made, there is in the table on page 142 also indications of what prior progress had been made in the previous financial year. And we can add to that as I get to that later about additions in strengthening the controls that we've done. Ms. Bartman's question, Member Bartman's question about the reliability and the issues really on the PDOs. They really deal with the PDOs, the plan targets, etc., and comments of the AG. I'm going to ask Ms. Wanda Conrad to comment on those just broadly, and then I'll wrap up that conversation with indications, and I'll also respond to Member Marais' questions because they're directed exactly at me. Mr. Eli, will you start off, please, with page 138's PFS cases and any other matters you'd like to address, and then I'll pick it up.
Yeah, good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, members of SCOPA. Just in terms of the questions around the open cases, just to say as a precursor that the bulk of the fraud cases we have in this department is unfortunately at school level. And it deals with various aspects relating to fraud and corruption and aspects around non-compliance and in some cases nepotism. In this particular case around the SAPS cases that was questioned on page 138, there were two cases like that was reported to SAPS, and that dealt with fraud and corruption at two particular schools that's within our domain. As far as process is concerned and progress around that matter is concerned, obviously we've PFS, Forensic Provincial Services, follows up with SAPS around the progress around that, and then gives the department and the audit committee feedback around that as well. So unfortunately, I don't have the feedback from SAPS yet. I think the lead time around SAPS reporting to us is quite a lengthy process, and in most cases, it's not always successful when it comes to prosecution by SAPS in that particular case. So that is in terms of the SAPS reported matters. In terms of the closed matters, the bulk of that, Chairperson, also relates to school level, and it also revolves around, as I indicated previously, around fraud and corruption and non-compliance matters, and therefore recommendations that came from Provincial Forensic Services is concerned. Thank you, Chairperson. Then in
Thank
terms
you.
of
Mr. Eli.
Yeah, then in terms of the progress around the indicators that my HOD has asked me to do, I think we did indicate certain progress. Unfortunately, Chairperson, when it comes to school level, given the wide scope of control that we have to do, it's unfortunate we can't check everything at school level. But let me say, as far as teacher absenteeism is concerned, we've implemented all the controls that we could, and as indicated in last year's report, we implemented all those controls. Unfortunately, we had challenges around the uploading of leave forms. We've done some training additional to that for school principals, but in some cases we had challenges, IT challenges in terms of school principals or schools that have to upload some of those leave forms, and also the submission around that as well. So the AG finding did indicate that we still have progress to be made in that regard as well. As far as the learner absenteeism is concerned, we still have challenges around that, Chair, with the method and our corrective action. But we have now made an undertaking that all schools will have physical learner registers that they need to update on a daily basis. And we've also engaged with our sector managers to check that for us on a weekly basis to make sure that we can report to corrected figures for the following financial year in that regard as well, Chair. Maybe the SG want to augment at this stage. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Eli. If I can just deal with that quickly, particularly the issues of progress on the predetermined objectives. The question that Member Sayed asked on the internal control deficiencies referred to on page 131. Page 140 responds to that question. If you take a look on page 140, you'll see that the findings on the internal control deficiencies there speak to the not having sufficiently appropriate record keeping in processes to ensure that the performance management was reported by credible supporting evidence. It's the evidence issue across the large sector. And the second one is the question of reviewing and monitoring controls that were not adequate to prevent, if you like, repeat challenges a few months later in the next financial period. Now, we have addressed that quite significantly. In the report on page 142, 143, we've indicated further progress made in clearing and resolving the matters in that table on the right-hand side. But besides that, we've also employed an additional person in the Directorate Business Strategy at an ASD level to sharpen the monitoring controls. It's exactly the issue that the AG referred to. We also previously instituted accountability letters. We have financial accountability letters that are issued by the accounting officer to every program manager who manages a financial program. We have now also instituted accountability letters for all program managers that manage the PDO programs or the PDO deliverables. We issued it in the course of last year, and we have strengthened that by issuing subsequent letters of instruction where necessary in precisely dealing with shortcomings that are still identified. Learner absenteeism is one such issue, and the textbook issue is another, but that's a bit more complex. We've also tasked from my office the Directorate Internal Control, so directorate in the department that had really looked at the financial issues largely up to this point. But the Directorate Internal Control is now overseeing also the deliverables on the financial management improvement plans, on the audit reports, but also on the PFS reporting and also the Public Service Commission reporting that highlights issues that need attention. So the Directorate Internal Control was tasked with the checking control effectiveness in the key performance indicators and also to issue a report with recommendations internally for us. That has been done. And on page 142, 143, you see the further progress that has been made in this regard. Mr. Eli referred to the learner absenteeism issue, which is persistent again. And it has become clear to us that the daily registers that ought to be kept in schools are not always kept in schools, in all schools throughout the province. Also bearing in mind the context in which some schools operate, the flexibility of learner influx and exit out of schools, it is made a little bit more difficult. Also the size of schools. We've put in place and strengthened that process now by reaffirming that for a period of time now, registers must be made. We must also remember that the monitoring and oversight controls of actions that happen in schools must be our districts. And so we've sharpened the district monitoring and control processes that are in place. The issues in the consistency in textbook and why there's a comment by the AG around the scope. I'm going to ask Ms. Conrad to specifically speak to that which happened and changed in the textbook arena. And let me just say that part of the challenge which we face is that when national indicators are defined, they are often defined and forced into all departments' annual reports without the indicator descriptors able to be managed. So when the indicator is put in there, there's also a defined national indicator descriptor that says how you do that calculation, what it is that must be used in the calculation. But the National Department of Education is not an implementing department. It doesn't have schools. And as a consequence, the understanding of that which we input into that conversation is not always taken on board. And once they've been decided upon, they are binding on provinces. And that makes it extremely difficult to then not only get the data, but to be able to show the evidence of that data on a number of issues. I'm just going to ask Ms. Conrad to just augment on the textbook matter and particularly the changes in how that was described from the one year to the next. Ms. Conrad?
SJ, thank you very much. I think you've covered most of it. The textbook matter, in terms of reliability and usefulness, what is happening in there is that halfway through, the measure of textbooks changed from all textbooks across every learner in every subject in every grade to instituting a sample-based, and that was of the the National Department of Education's directive of how it is that we're going to measure. And the auditors are correct, because you're using a sample to indicate your own figures, it's difficult for them to go in and use exactly the same sample again. So the textbooks does become a control matter. And then at school level, it's very difficult also, given the maturity of different schools and given the fact that most of the systems in place currently in most of our schools are manual systems. It's also difficult to necessarily, what they're talking about is finding the evidence. Schools have not in the past necessarily held on to learner level data of textbooks issuing when the next academic year comes into play, and hold on to information for periods of time. And that has just been a managerial thing at school level, and that has been addressed with schools as far from district level. So schools have received a directive, an indication of what it is that we need to do in terms of managing the school textbook issuing, in terms of maintaining the evidence and the material to support the issuing of textbooks as well as the collection of textbooks. I note that Member Bartman asked some specific questions about whether indicators can be changed when they were set by the National Department. There's a lot of details in Member Bartman's questions, and I'm suggesting, Chair, that at a later date, rather than at this bigger oversight, we can have another session where detailed information is given on how targets are set, how indicators come from the National Department, how the department engages the National Department, because we do engage, we do advise, we do indicate when indicators are not smart indicators, where the on-the-ground management of the production of the output of the performance indicator is going to be problematic, not just for ourselves, but for other education departments. And we attempt to, if you will, influence the National Department in the way that they think around some of the performance indicators and the broadness of those indicators. And then even when solutions are found or attempted to be found to that broadness, we do engage with them. But the details of the process of that, I think maybe we should keep that for another day.
Thank you, Ms. Conrad. Thank you. Chair, I'm going to now just move to aspects that have not been answered yet. In Member Said's question, he referred to the section in paragraph on page 132 about the quality teaching and learning and the challenges and how resolved. The vision of this department is ensuring that there's quality education for every child in every classroom in every school in the province. That's critical because we must ensure that not only affluent kids, not only kids with certain backgrounds, in fact, it's the kids that comes from challenged environments where quality education is even more critical than where it is attained. And so with that vision in mind, we recognize that there is not yet quality in every classroom and will not easily be because we will up the standards all the time. Some of the challenges that we face have got to do with overcrowding. It's got to do with learners coming in late. It's got to do with learners not having been in grade R. It's got to do with societal factors that are not necessarily education's factors, but impact on the quality of education. The input factors that education does, despite our challenges, we're able to do. But when learners come in from poor communities, aren't fed at home, come to school hungry, for example, the quality of the education outcomes that they get are impacted by that space. If we take a look at the societal violence, the gangsterism, the crime that communities face, children are impacted severely by those factors. How do we expect a child to learn effectively in such an environment? And until society takes hands, also with education, but with all role players, in addressing these matters, education will always have its inequalities that we need to leapfrog and challenge. And the Education Department has done a lot to do so. In fact, one of the things that I'm very proud of is in a number of years ago when we had the LitNum strategy, we received international recognition in our department for uplifting the performance of quintiles 1, 2, and 3 to have performances that are the same instead of one being significantly lower than quintile 2 than quintile 3. They were poverty bound. Now, the performance of quintile 1, 2, and 3 are equivalent and approximating quintile 4. And that's a great achievement in any education department, and it's also globally recognized. And whilst we achieved that in the LitNum strategy, we've carried that through into education in this province. And you see similar things in the TIMS reporting that was reported a few months ago, just before the end of the year, where the Western Cape had again performed best, indicating that we pulled together, we've pulled particularly, the things that I'm proud of, is we've pulled up the lower performance, whilst at the same time also increasing the quality of higher performance. That's the challenge of education. We've got a number of strategies to deal with this. One of them touches Member Murray's question, and that's the e-learning strategy. It's a strategy that has been in place for a few years now, where we're rolling out connectivity to schools, we're rolling out digital classrooms, we're rolling out digital content, and we have, as you know well, a website with thousands of free digital resources for learners and teachers across all curricula. But I'll speak a bit more in detail when I address Member Murray's question specifically. For the time being, that quality of teaching and learning has a lot to do with what we are able to input. And so resources is one, teacher training is another, getting into a future focus where the digital world is there. We all know that children have an innate propensity to digital learning. It's innate, rich or poor, it's innate. And as I'd indicated over years when we had introduced the e-learning strategy, if we did nothing as an education department for the last number of years, as some people would suggest, because there's a financial implication, but if we did nothing, the affluent would continue to have access. They've got ABS lines, they've got Wi-Fi in the home, they've got multiple devices, and the poor don't. And so giving access to poorer learners from poorer communities through Wi-Fi, through cheap data, through zero-rated digital resourcing on our e-learning portal, those are parts and parcel of it. At the same time, our most valuable resource in education is the teacher. It's also the most expensive resource. And so the quality of the teacher and teaching has to be geared with developing learners that are global citizens. And our poor learners are going to be able to compete internationally and globally. So Again, it's a topic, Member Sayed, that Chair, we can spend on specifically. Just in the lockdown period, the work that has been done by our curriculum people under the leadership of Dr. Peter Beets has been phenomenal. It's been world-class, world-leading, certainly leading South Africa and assisting DBE also in getting its thinking in the digital arena. It remains a challenge. The second thing that we have done, which is absolutely significant to quality teaching and learning, and I want to say that it's in many ways my urgent departing desire. We have to give our kids hope. Our kids are being battered socioeconomically, they're being battered with crime, they're being battered with hunger and poverty. We have to give our children hope. They've now had a double whammy with COVID-19. It is, of course, not only battered children, it's also sent fear and shockwaves through our teaching fraternity. We've got to give our kids hope. And you will hear a lot about our Transform to Perform strategy, which is a 20-year strategy to bring back values into education so that eventually those values impact on society. It's fundamental to improving quality teaching and learning. It's also intended to give our kids a sense of the value of a growth mindset, that they can change and do something to their system. The third element of that Transform to Perform strategy is changing the mindsets of teachers, letting them reaffirm the fact that they must be instruments in creating hope for children. And as I've said frequently, I've never seen a despondent teacher that can inspire a child. And we have to inspire our children. Leadership development is the fourth aspect related to this. And there's new thinking that we will share shortly about the importance of dealing more effectively with the crime, the violence, particularly the violent responses of learners in our society. If we don't address those things, underpinning issues, quality of teaching and learning will remain to suffer, and it will remain to enhance inequality instead of equality. In the context of emerging risks related to COVID, Member Said, the challenges in education globally and also in South Africa is, of course, disruption to schooling. International research tells us that when there is abnormal disruption to schooling, the schooling sector or system loses more learners who drop out of education. In the Western Cape, we're working and fighting very hard to retain learners. And that retention is more important in a time of COVID-19. Thankfully, we recognize that learners are not generally super spreaders and learners are not worse affected. And therefore, the importance that education gets going is so critical. Of course, we understand the anxiety and the fear of people, particularly teachers. And so catch-up plans for curriculum, we fed into national catch-up plans. Our curriculum people's input on the national level is valued, and the contribution that we make certainly has an impact on national processes and policies and plans. And so the measures are in place. Last night, I wrote a letter to all schools about this year's start, which of course is impacted upon late in January with extension of risk-adjusted level 3. Also directions being published on Thursday or Friday. And these aspects must be communicated to schools regularly. And so our plans are in place in this regard. The question about sanitizers this year, are they being provided again? Last year, Member Said, we provided excess so-called PPEs or health and safety materials for all schools. Some schools said it's too much, they don't want it. And we said, you have to have it, you have to stockpile it because COVID is not gone. And so all schools have quantities that are sufficient to carry them for the next number of months. At the same time, last year in September, we wrote to schools as they were doing their budget to tell them that there would not be a reissuing of those kinds of quantities of materials, and that schools need to utilize the norms and standards funding, the local purchase part of it, to augment supplies, for example, learner masks or PPEs if required. And not a single school has raised a concern or an alarm at this point. All of them have indicated that they are happy, and we will continue to monitor, and that they are ready, and we will continue to monitor that process going forward. Where schools are about to reopen with SMTs going back today, school management teams, teachers on the 1st of February, there's ample time now to ensure a clean, healthy, safe, planned environment for the return of learners on the 15th of February. Then Ms. Bartman, Member Bartman's questions. The challenge of indicator definition has been indicated, and your sharp identification of the issues in the audit report, in our annual report, and also the AG's comment about controls in place, those issues are quite clear. The matter of specific recommendations, the AG also supplies management with a management report for management's information. And at the same time, I suppose, Ms. Bartman, if someone were to tell you how to make coffee that themselves have never made coffee, you wouldn't have a lot of faith in that. And the AG's never run an education department, and so at the same time, we can't expect the AG to give all the detailed educational recommendations. Education has to draw on its own knowledge and experience in identifying the areas to address. The AG, in a sense, flags it, and we need to resolve it. The issue is not in identifying the plans and the interventions that need to resolve it. The issue is you have people down the line. We have 40,000 employees in the education system, and one is dependent on people to make sure that the implementation happens, the monitoring happens, the controls are in place, etc. And as the leadership of this organization, the EXCO and the top management are determined to make sure that our governance oversight is such that those methodologies get strengthened and those measures get strengthened in dealing with it. And so, yeah, it remains a challenge. Chair, I'm going to conclude with I think Ms. Member Bota's question related to page 138. I think we addressed related to those matters. And then Member Maria's question directed at me. Thank you, Member Maria. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the question really about what is it? What is the new norm? What are the challenges? And thank you for highlighting very effectively the fact that we are under siege as the Western Cape Education Department. The budget is getting cut all the time. And even when it doesn't cut, if it's not added to at the expansion rate of our learners, then it means we cut. It means we can't cope with the influx. The details of that we've reported on many occasions in various places. The fact of the matter is that the Western Cape is being overcrowded, and we are not getting sufficient budget to be able to deal with it. So what is the solution? Unfortunately, as the accounting officer and as the EXCO of this department, we can't throw our hands up in despair and say, well, what now? We have to manage the space. And yes, COVID-19 in South Africa and across the globe is changing the way that thinking around education is happening. And there is no doubt the global discourse, of which I'm part, is a conversation about ensuring that blended learning approaches get emphasized. Blended learning approaches speaks to ensuring that there is digital learning that happens so that learning does not just happen in the classroom. And I want to say again, this is not new to COVID-19. The fact of the matter is if you compare affluent children and poor children in this country and in this province, affluent children have a longer period of learning opportunities than learners from poor communities. Because learners from poor communities have a period in class which is not always the most conducive to learning, have almost no extracurricular activities. Learning at home is difficult. In many cases, child-headed households, many learners in a single room, family in one room, living in a shack. Those learners' ability to have extended learning outside the classroom time is limited. Affluent kids don't have that limitation. And so unless we get equality in society, we will have this challenge. So how do we address this anomaly? Well, part of that is in the strategic plans of this organization and has been for a number of years. The move from the global context of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, to STEMAC has been a signal that, amongst others, agriculture, because we're a rural province, arts, because of the talent of our young people in all areas in this province, and more importantly, a greater focus on skills education, so that the academic education, which will have limited job opportunities, can be augmented by focusing on skills education. And so the whole expansion of technology education, of agricultural skills education, of schools of skills is an important, if you like, new norm. We've got targets for that. Within a 5-year period, we want to double the number of learners who are exposed to those subjects and skills. But more importantly, and this is what you alluded to, I think, I don't know what the new norm is going to be, but there will be changes. There will be changes in the nature of schools. Now, remember, Murray, we already at the beginning of last year, prior to COVID, we've instructed our districts to install 2 digital distribution classes in every district, where the best teacher in a subject range, initially for high school, is able to transmit lessons live to any other school. The Western Cape is able to do this because all our schools have broadband connectivity. Not all effective and efficient yet, but they all have broadband connectivity. All our schools in the Western Cape have Wi-Fi points, at least one for a learner and one for teachers. It might be in a computer lab. All our schools have computer labs. But we're rolling out Wi-Fi blankets over all our schools, approximately 150 to 300 a year, depending on the delay. Some of this is dependent on international imports. We're rolling out Wi-Fi blankets so that digital learning can happen in any space in the school, also just around the school building. This is already in place. We are already creating virtual classrooms, and we had, even in lockdown, wonderful examples of the poorest communities where schools had done video lessons by WhatsApp, pushing to cell phones of the household. All households have a cell phone, pushing a little bit of data per day to the cell phones of households so that digital lessons can be transposed and learners can load up again. This happened in the poorest communities in this province. Small scale, but it's starting. We're also in the process of developing a virtual school as an experiment. And a number of our schools are leading the way in what you might call the new norm. There are many things that must change. The way in which learners are supported is done so, and the planning ahead has been in place. It's not COVID that has only initiated this. 3 years ago, we started strategic thinking around what we call future-focused education, and future-focused education for all. And I think that is the key point. Yeah, I'm going to pause there because certainly this last bit is not necessarily directly related to this committee's interrogation of the financial section C and E, but I think it's an important conversation, and I'm very happy to continue this conversation also in other. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, HOD. Just I just want to check HOD, thank very much for this elaborate response. Now, just on some of the questions that we just raised, I just want to check. So we are trying to say then, therefore, there was no recommendation from the AG on the measurement of the indicators. Is that the case? Oh. Okay, I see.
Sorry, just repeat, please, Chair.
No, I'm just saying maybe if I got you correctly in some of the questions that were asked on the issues of the measurement of the indicators. One of the direct question that was asked was that what were the recommendations from the AG on the measurement of the indicators? Is that the clear answer is that there were none?
Yes, thank you very much. The AG does not usually give any indication of the actual indicator. The AG's view is that the indicator is predetermined and the department reports on the indicator, and the AG then seeks to get evidence of the department's reporting that it is accurate on the indicator. That's the role of the AG. Also, in this part of non-financials, the AG's comment then often is that it hasn't got enough evidence, or the reporting can't be substantiated through that sample which the AG then seeks to verify. And if the verification is out, then they say, but the department does not, got measures in place to make sure that it is accurate. And I mean, in the context of the complexity of the organization, I understand that fully. But the AG does not go into the actual indicator and suggest what the indicator must be or how it is measured, as we indicated, because that's usually determined nationally and is valid across all departments.
Thank you. I see Honorable Partman. I take it you want the follow-up, Honorable Partman?
Yes, please, Chair, if possible.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the HOD Schroeder as well as Ms. Conrad for the comprehensive answer. I accept the recommendation from Ms. Conrad regarding a possible another session regarding the national indicators and how they are being set. And my recommendation, which I'll repeat later to the committee, would be that we include the Education Committee on this. Setting of indicators, I do think, fall more under their mandate, and perhaps they can invite us as the SCOPA committee. My follow-up questions, based on the answers, are to the AG chairperson. If the AG, if National tells us this is the indicator for textbooks, this is how the indicator for textbooks need to be measured, then the AG says, based on how you're going to measure the textbooks in the province, it is not going to be reliable or useful because of these particular reasons. Then they tell this to the province. But the province's answer essentially is, AG, we agree with you, but we cannot set the indicator ourselves or say what we're going to use to measure this indicator, even though we've made a recommendation to national. So now my question to the AG is, did the AG make this recommendation to the National Department of Education regarding this indicator and evidence and measurements? And what was the National Department's response? Secondly, is this not a predetermined outcome that would basically say that the department would fail based on the outcome? Because my question is essentially is the National Department of Education setting all provinces up to fail if the Auditor General does not agree with the measurement of this target? Because if National is setting this target for the Western Cape, is this target set exactly the same for all other provinces? Because it's a national target. And does that mean that no education department in the whole South Africa will get a clean audit because the AG doesn't agree with the implementation of the provinces on a national indicator? I just want to find out, am I correct on that? And then finally to the AG, based on pages 40 and 78 of the annual performance plan of the Western Cape 2021 to 2022 to 2023. The new indicator says, because Chair, you must now remember we're going to be back here next year, I'm going to be asking the same questions. By the allocation of textbooks to learners, the new indicator PPM 208 says, percentage of learners with English first additional language and mathematics textbooks in grade 3, 6, 9, and 12. Okay, it shows that it's a new indicator and what the target is. And then when you go to page 78, where they specifically say here in the book how they're going to measure. It says here means of verification, assumptions, data limitations, method of calculation. The means of verification on page 78 says SAM's retrieval system or record of learner level distribution list or issuing registered or captured on the electronic system. The method of calculation is numerator, total number of learners that have received English first additional language and mathematics textbooks in grades 3, 6, 9, and 12 in at least a sample of 60 randomly selected schools, which will be 30 primary and 30 secondary. The denominator will be the total number of learners in the sample schools multiplied by 100. Now, Chair, because annual reports are retrospective, we are assessing what has already happened. Things that are going to happen in the future, we do in our normal select committees, we do in budget, we do in all of those things. Given that the year for next year's annual report has already started, and that the target for 2020-2021 has already been set, does this mean that I am not necessary to be in next year's SCOPA meeting, because in the end, it is predetermined that the Education Department of the Western Cape is not going to get a clean audit because of this particular target that is set by national. I just would like some clarity on that, because if someone's telling me to make coffee, but I don't agree with how I'm making the coffee, and then someone comes and judges me on the fact that I'm not making coffee correctly, even though I agree with them that I'm not making the coffee correctly, that I'm not sure how I'm being held accountable for making coffee incorrectly that I do not like. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks, Honorable Parkman. Now, members, I just take that now. These are just follow-up questions, ne, based on the responses that were given. So I see Honorable Mare and then Honorable Said after him.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't know, I'm getting a bit, the questioning of Honorable Bartman, it might be important, but it's a repetition of the same question. I don't know what other answers you expect. You had 3 answers to the same questions already, and we're getting bogged down with this questioning. It's like, I don't know, if Mr. Schroeder, if you can agree with me, is this akin to national government deciding how the benches and houses should look that's given to poor communities, and then the courts are asked to determine whether they build it on the right site or not, and whether the house is painted the right color or not. It's not the court's function. It's not the court's function to come and tell national government how to do it, because the courts don't know how to build a house. The municipalities that builds it. So to come and say that we must do it how the court says we must do it, it can't be done. Although they are oversight function. The courts have an oversight function on the legislature, but the courts can't tell the legislature how to do it. They'll decide how big the house is, what color the house will be, and on what plot the house will be built. But they're still building houses. With Mr. Scooter, would you agree that that could be a very crude example? But really, that's what it comes down to. It's the man down there who do the job who decide how it's going to be done.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mare. Honorable Said.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't want to go this route, Chair, because we've had our opportunity with the Auditor General. And I think Member Bartman posed those questions to the Auditor General, or posed questions and an opportunity. But I think I'm also now, given that a precedent has been set, I'm also going to ask the Auditor General now, based on what Member Bartman has asked, if the Auditor General can just give us with regards to the indicator of textbooks, can the Auditor General tell us whether that is the same standard that is used for the rest of the provinces? I just wanted to get a sense of that, whether that's the same standard used by the AG to assess other provinces, so that we don't have an impression that the Western Cape is treated differently. Just wanted to get a sense of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Said. AG? AG?
Thank you, Chairperson. I am here. I'll respond to the question. So maybe just first of all, we had a lot of time for discussing this, but I think first of all important to note, and I think as the department was responding, they were indicating about the indicator number 1, the way it was set up from the beginning of the year, and during the middle of the year that has changed. So originally when we were looking at this, it was still reported the same previous year. So it's only part of the financial year that's changed, and we could only pick it up then in terms when we started the auditing process. And hence the manner in which the indicator was measured was then picked up, that there was a concern when it came to the usefulness of the information. I can confirm, Chairperson, throughout the office or throughout other provinces, we basically use exactly the same methodology. So there's not a different methodology. And as far as my memory do serve, that this finding has been consistently raised throughout the other provinces. So what we also do from an AG space perspective, from a consistency perspective, if any person has picked up any finding, we basically discuss it consistently and make sure that across board, if there's similar findings, it's raised throughout the other provinces. So this matter has been raised consistently, so that I can confirm it's exactly the same methodology that is basically used. I think important to note in terms of the relationship with the national department and the provincial departments, when those discussions basically happened, how the indicators are being set up, because the provinces are privy to those discussions where they can give their views, where they can give their opinions. What we can do from our side is just to follow up with our national counterparts that audits the national department in cases where there has been concerns raised, how these concerns has been taken into account. But I think, Chairperson, our mandate is very clear. It's to audit and report. So we can't give advice from the start to say, this is how you're supposed to do it. We basically come after the effect and we audit and report. I think that roles and responsibility is with the national department and the provincial department. And I think from the province's perspective, they've got the opportunity to raise the views, because ultimately, as a province, you will have to report on that specific indicator and how the information will be collected and put together. So that is still the accountability of the accounting officer to make sure that that occurs. So I think important to note that from the provincial side is to say, when our matters are not taken up, to provide them in writing so that complaints can be lodged and with the national department where those disagreements are. And I think that would also be a basis to make sure follow-ups are then occur where things has been raised and those things has not been taken into account, because it's very difficult then to go back if there's no evidence in place to say there was discussions, we put this on the table, it wasn't taken into account. But I think important that those conversations needs to be recorded in writing. Then for the new financial year, and Chairperson, as you are aware that in terms of COVID-19 and where we are, and we started this specific audit process also much later because of extension given, and for the municipalities that we are currently busy with. So there is delay in the audit process. So we haven't commenced the audit process at the Department of Education yet. So at this stage, I cannot comment on what Honourable Member Bartman is indicating, will the finding be reoccurring. So based on we haven't done any work, so I cannot confirm that at this point in time relating to that. But I can give the assurance that the methodologies are being consistently applied throughout the country. And from our side, we are responsible to audit and report. We don't set any standards in terms how these indicators must be set up or what the description. We only come after the effect to make sure that it basically complies with the requirements and the criteria.
Chair, you're on mute.
Oh, my apologies, my apologies. Thanks, Honorable Bartman. I just wanted to bring to your attention that you must know that we are still dealing only with Section C. We must still go to Section E. So if you may just please be alert to that when you are also asking question and mindful of the time constraint. Now, having got that response from the AG, I don't know whether is there any addition maybe that we can get from the department if they want to make an addition.
Thank you. The only one is in response to Member Murray asking me whether I agree with him on his assertion. It's an interesting assertion, but being administrator and not a politician and being totally politically naive as I am, it's difficult for me to agree or disagree with him. I will have to leave that to the committee.
Thank you very much, HOD, for that. Just maybe one or two issues I just wanted to raise from my side. I just always take the issue of the school governing bodies as a very important element in terms of the governance of the school generally, especially that this section deals with the governance. I see on page 132, you're indicating that you've got something called the school improvement plan. I just want to check from you, HOD, whether are the SGB also very familiar with this aspect, which I think is a very important tool in terms of actually bringing the community on board on issues of school governance. The other issue, I think on the same page, I see at the bottom of the page 132, school evaluation were conducted at 24 schools from April to October 2019. I just want to check whether what criteria did you use in selecting in the selection of this school, and then whether as to how were the result to that effect. I think generally most of the question really I wanted to ask have also in a way been asked indirectly by members, and I don't want to bore you or actually just do a repetition of that. Thanks, HOD.
Thank you, Chair. If I can respond. First of all, thank you for raising the matter of SGBs that are very critical. One of the earlier questions around the issues that need improvement and quality education, etc. We've asked districts over the last 2 years to prioritize key areas in their oversight. One of those is ensuring that all schools are functional entities. Because if a school is not a functional organization, then quality education can't happen in it. The second one is ensuring that quality teaching happens in every classroom. That's focusing on the quality teaching. And the third one was to ensure enabling governance. And the reason for that is just that where schools are in turmoil, we often have a breakdown between the relationship between governors and managers, where the school governing body is either overstepping its mark or struggling to comply, the principal is overstepping his or her mark, and the distinction between governance and management becomes opaque. And so thank you for raising this issue because it's very critical. The school improvement plans that the school has to design based on every year and analyzing its performance levels and its functionality now must also be signed off by the school governing body. So the intent is clear that school management and school governing body engage collectively. Also, in all schools, if it's well functioning, the governing body ought to get reports from management on progress with school development. And so, yes, it's absolutely central and functional to that space. The school evaluations that you refer to is, you will notice on page 132, the slight distinction. The paragraph just above the last paragraph spoke about the whole school evaluation. It was in the space where that matter was being factored out slowly as the school evaluation authority, which is now legally in place in the Western Cape, was coming into being. And we ran pilot evaluations. So the school evaluations were pilot evaluations. Those 24 schools that were selected to hone the instruments, to test the schools' responses to the school evaluation process, to test the responses to the instruments, and to get feedback from their experiences and their views. And so these 24 were chosen to be representative high schools, primary schools, and across districts. In going forward now, the School Evaluation Authority, which is now a legislative entity, identifies schools for evaluation in an ongoing basis itself. The intention is that in a 5-year period, all schools ought to be evaluated by this external and independent evaluation specialization body. It then gives feedback into the department so that we can then concentrate on where improvement is required on the identified issues. So just in the context of your response, Chair, that 2 to 3 day was the pilot process at that stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, HOD. And I think I take it that members now, we very much exhausted all our questions so far as section C is concerned. And I would like us now to move to section E. Can I maybe request that then I see the hand of Honorable Said?
No, it's fine, Chair. It's down now.
Can I ask honorable members, it's just going to be 10 to, in my watch, it's going to be 10 to 11. Maybe if we, at this juncture, maybe just take maybe 10 minutes just to stretch the legs, and for those who want to quickly go and run and do a cup of coffee to do that and be back in 10 minutes. Is that in order?
Yes, Chair, that is in order.
Okay. So can we come back at 10 to 11?
All in order. Yes, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Honorable Member. If we may please resume. It's now on the dot, 10 minutes before 11. I think, as I've indicated, we are going to move on to section E, and section E starts on page 187. Now, I would like to, I don't know whether maybe are there any introductory remark that the department or the minister would like to have. If there is none, I would like to get an indication if there are questions that members would like to ask on section, on part E, which deals with the financial information.
Me at this stage, thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I see Honorable Said.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think a lot of what I wanted to raise around the issues of the findings of the Auditor General were already responded to in quite section C. So I'm not going to go. I'm just going to go into from page 219 to page 235. So from 219 on the issue of the liabilities, current liabilities, voted funds to be surrendered to the revenue fund. I just wanted to get some reasons as to why those funds were surrendered to the revenue fund, and why that amount in particular. Page 235, travel and subsistence, and the issue of foreign travel. Just wanted to get a sense as to what are the details of the foreign travel, including the details of the delegation, countries visited, the reasons for those visits, and perhaps maybe they won't be able to give in depth in this meeting, but the cost breakdown of each trip in particular. And I just wanted to check because last year we were in the same meeting and I posed also a similar question around the foreign travel, and the department indicated or that it would give the information to Scopa. Now, because I don't sit on the committee and maybe I should have followed up, I just wanted to get a sense maybe if I can be guided, Chair, as to whether that information came last year. I just wanted to get a sense from you.
Sorry, Chair, members, I'm not hearing him.
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, can you repeat? I think it's the HOD. Is it you, HOD, who say you are not hearing?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members, I cut out on 2 occasions.
Can you just repeat the last part, Comrade?
Okay, Chair. Chair, yeah, what I wanted to know, and this is maybe more directed to you, Chair. Last year, I posed a similar question. There were responses, but it was also indicated that the department will be asked by the committee to send this information through. This was last year's one. I mean, this was on the previous annual report. I'm not a member of the committee, so I may not have had access to that. I just wanted to get a sense as to whether that information was submitted and whether the committee has it. But my first question, but my main part of the question was just for the details of the foreign travel and including the details of the delegation, countries visited, and the reasons for the visits. Then on page 235, I end off there with the debts that have been written off. If we could maybe just give some detail as to the nature of these debts and why they were written off. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Honorable Said. Honorable Bartman.
Thank you, Chairperson. I only have one question at Part E. It is on page 240. It is in note 14.1 under the payables clearing accounts. And I'm not sure if there's been an increase in employees of some sort, but the income tax and medical aid has almost tripled, essentially, in terms of salaries and so on. Whereas most, if not all, of the other amounts have more or less stayed similar according to the previous year. And I just wanted to find out what the reason for that was. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Batman. Maybe just one or two questions from my part, just a point of clarity in terms of the report of the Auditor General. If you go to 192, I think maybe this can be answered by the department and maybe to a certain extent also the Auditor General. 192, I think it's section 34, it says that management did not have appropriate record-keeping processes in place to ensure that reported performance information was supported by credible supporting evidence. If maybe I can just have some responses to more clarity on that section. Then the last one is on section 39. It says the Special Investigation Unit is currently investigating the COVID-19 procurement processes. The investigation is still in progress. If maybe we can be just shed some light as to the progress that has already been made on this matter. I think that's it. Maybe before I can allow the a response either from the HOD or the Auditor General. I see Mr. Davis, Dustin, your hand was up.
Yes, sorry, Chairperson. Chair, just to answer Member Said's request. Yes, the information was received from the department and it was emailed onto the Public Accounts Committee members.
Thank you very much, Mr. David. Can I get a response from the question that is raised by members?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask Mr. Eli to kick off. He can do, I think, all of them. I will respond to the chair's questions at the end. Mr. Eli.
Yeah, thank you, SAD, and thank you, Chairperson. Just in terms of Mr. Sayed, Member Sayed's question around the surrendering of funds, Chairperson, that relates to our under expenditure, which is in terms of our savings, which was mainly for that particular year. Was mainly to do with compensation of employees. That we had savings there because we couldn't employ in some cases, the timeless appointment of people, and also towards the latter part of the year, we didn't appoint all the substitutes as well. So we had savings on compensation, and that's in the report as indicated. So that's why we have to surrender in terms of law. We have to surrender that to Provincial Treasury. Then, in terms of the question around foreign travel, Chair, we will provide the details relating to that. I'm not sure if the HG wants to respond to that, but we will provide the details as requested by Member Sayed in terms of the detail requested as well. Then in terms of debt write-offs, Chairperson, just to say in terms of debt write-offs are legislated in terms of the process that we have to follow. We just don't write off debts as a first instance, but just to say that we have to follow due process. We have to contact the debtor. We have to try and recover some of that money. It's only after we've done a due process, after we try to make contact through a debt collector, private debt collector, and we've tried all kinds of means to try and get hold of a related debtor before we can write it off in terms of legislation. So we followed due process there. Then in terms of the nature of these debts, you will see there that we have the major part of that is salary overpayments. Salary overpayments relates to what we call the pillar process. The pillar process is where people go into incapacity, where they apply for incapacity. And then unfortunately that process works vice versa, where we first allow the person to go on the incapacity leave, and then we have a house risk manager that we then put that application through, where we then go through a process of approval or not. That where it's not approved, then we have to recover the money from that particular person. If it's an employee, then it's fine, and we just deduct in a with agreement or not employee in terms of the amount of deduction. If it's an ex-employee, then obviously that's a different process we follow, and there we try to use a private debt collector, or if they have the person's details, we will contact the person to then start with a deduction in that regard. And therefore, yeah, so the same is also with the employee tax as well. If a person is an ex-employee, we will try and then recover that. Yeah, recover that money as well. For current employees, we will do the same in terms of deduction from the current salary with the agreement. So, Chairperson, just in terms of that, that's unfortunately how it happens. Although, as you can see, the debts written off has decreased because we're trying to improve our processes in terms of collection as well. We have in the past done much work in terms of either writing off old debt or try to minimize debt write-offs. I also must say that there's a correlation between debt write-offs and the state of the economy. Obviously, as people or ex-employees become more unemployed or we can't trace them, then obviously that will increase. But fortunately for us, for the year under review, that debt write-off has decreased because of the efforts we made in terms of trying to collect debt as far as possible. Then, as far as payables are concerned, Chairperson, payables, these clearing accounts, they fluctuate from month to month. And therefore, it's a technical matter as far as accounting is concerned. So the reasons for the increase in the payables is that we couldn't pay over during the first week of April due to the lockdown as well, and therefore that amount was quite high. Yeah, so that's why the amount that now lies in what we call the clearing accounts, which is really suspense accounts by nature. Then, Chairperson, your question around paragraph 34 on page 192 around the record keeping processes. I think that is just a summary of the matters we discussed previously around the AG concluding in terms of the audit findings that for those indicators, in their view, there was no record keeping, well, there's a lack of or inappropriate record keeping process the department needs to give attention to. And I think we've spoken to those measures that we're trying to put in place to try and improve those record keeping measures as well. Then, as far as SIU is concerned, the Special Investigation Unit Chairperson, that investigation unit do not report to us. They've had all the they've requested all the evidence from us. The reason for that investigation unit came from the publication by the Provincial Treasury around the fact that we only mainly used one service provider, and the reason for that is because we've had existing contract with that service provider, and National Treasury regulations allow us to do that where that service provider supplies the same products, or whether it's sanitizers or disinfectant, etc. So we had existing contract in place to do that. However, I must say, in terms of the outcome of that investigation, the Special Investigation Unit do not report to us. Our understanding is that they will report that to the Department of the Premier as when appropriate, and then the department will take action from there on once we receive any report from them in that regard. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just augment the last items, please, if you allow me. Chair, basically on your question, as Mr. Eli indicated on page 192, it refers to my comments also in the previous occasion where I spoke about the actions that we've taken on page 140 of the findings of the internal control deficiencies. And the examples, I believe, of those areas where the appropriate record keeping, the AG's viewed, they don't contest that we keep records. It's the appropriacy of the record keeping with the emphasis on being able to give credible supporting evidence. And so, for example, if we take a look at learner absenteeism schedules, for example, which we then collect and supply to the AG, or whether it's on textbooks or textbook retrieval, for example, if there's not a school stamp on some of those, then the credibility of the data is questioned, and quite rightly so as well. So it's really the credibility of it and upping our record keeping to make sure that it's not just a question of having the evidence that we can give, but that evidence must be able to be credible and substantiated. And it's in that context that those issues are there. We have spoken previously about the measures that we've already put in place to try to address them. Just in the context of the SIU, I just want to point out that we've cooperated fully with the SIU. We have copied reams and reams and reams of documentation over months. They've come back with further questions, and further questions. We have had absolutely no adverse comments from the SIU, and therefore we take it that had there been any challenges that they may have identified, we would surely have already have heard about it to put corrective measures in place. There have been no feedback in that regard whatsoever over the months of the investigation. There is not in the last 2 or 3 or 4 months been any further inquiries for information from their side. Just to indicate that, we therefore await if there will be any feedback at all. And we don't know whether there will or won't be, but just so that you understand where that stands. Thank you, Chair.
Advocate. Advocate.
Chair, are you referring to me?
Yes, madam.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure, there might be someone else also in the meeting with a similar title. Chair, I just want to ask a follow-up question on a question member side posed and answers that were given to us. I wanted to find out regarding surrendered funding. And perhaps this is something that we should probably take to budget as well. I wanted to find out if there's a particular law or regulation of some sort that tells us when money must be surrendered, if so how, if so when, what the steps are. Like, where can I go looking for that section or that rule of some sort or that law that says how money from a department is surrendered, or when does it not get surrendered, for example. And I also wanted to find out what the engagements usually are before such money is surrendered. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Advocate. HOD.
Thanks. I'll kick off, and Mr. Eli, who's the specialist in the field, can augment to that, just to say that surrendered funding is sometimes also a methodology. You see, the problem is that the financial year does not suit education. The financial year, which is from April to March, doesn't coincide with the academic year. And so almost 2 months of the financial year, right at the end of the financial year, December and January, are what we would call dead months. And that sometimes is a challenge. I wish that that could be changed to coincide with academic years, but of course it has all other kinds of implications. Sometimes when it is impossible to spend funding, you surrender it with a view also for it to be reallocated in the next financial year. There are sometimes commitments which are not surrendered. The commitments, of course, are then carried over, and that has to be an engagement also with Provincial Treasury. But largely, it's a question that I think the committee could also ask Provincial Treasury in your engagement with them, and they could also give some clarification on that. Mr. Eli, is there anything you want to add to that matter?
No, I think, Chairperson, HOD, you are correct. I think there are Provincial Treasury regulations, and also at national there are laws that governs these issues. And then there's also the issue around Division of Revenue Act that also governs certain aspects of it. So I think, it's applicable to all departments, and therefore Provincial Treasury should be able to guide the committee in that regard. Thank you.
Chairperson, may I add something?
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Thanks very much. My understanding is that it's actually, I think it was a PT and a cabinet decision, and it's quite difficult for us because, yeah, if we have a budget, it would be far better for us to be able to divert that budget, the HOD as the accounting officer, to be able to spend it on other things that we desperately need in the department. And unfortunately, this is actually taking away our discretion in that regard, where we could quickly divert it to perhaps a school building project or that's already in the pipeline. And then the impression is created, well, it's not created, we have to give back the money. But I do think that is something that would be good to interrogate Provincial Treasury about, because yeah, as you all know, there's more than enough for us to spend that money on in the department. And if we have to then give it back to Treasury, it very often isn't given back to us, or if it is, it's given back with conditions and stipulations and restrictions on what we can use it for. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks, Minister. Honorable members, are there any further questions on section E? Honorable Said, I was just about to say going once, going twice. Honorable Said.
Thank you. Sorry for that. I just wanted to check again what happens to the surrendered funds. And if the department could probably explain why they're not applying for rollovers. And is there any control that the department has over surrendered funds? And what happens if Treasury sends it, for example? I mean, I like to okay, that's fine. I leave that other part. Yeah, just wanted to get a sense of those 2 points. Thank you.
Yes,
Eli?
HOD.
Thank you, Mr. Eli.
Yes, HOD. Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, HOD. Just in terms of surrendered funds, obviously that discretion then lies with Provincial Treasury, because what happens in government and in the province, there are obviously other commitments as well, etc. That because Provincial Treasury manages the budget for the province as a whole, and therefore obviously there might be some other issues if there are surrendered funds coming forth that it can possibly by discretion it can utilize that for. However, I must say that my understanding is that process, well, there is also a process for that in terms of division of that surrendered funds. Some of the surrendered funds might come back to our department in terms of rollovers, where and a rollover will only happen and it will only approve that where we have actually proven that we have a commitment in that regard, whether we've allocated the tender already or we've placed an order for that. If we can provide proof in that regard, we will get funds back in that regard. Just to say, for the year under review, all the applications we made in terms of rollovers, we received approval for that. It's only small portions that we actually surrendered to the revenue fund, apart now from non-compensation, that actually went back to the revenue fund. So there is a process. We do get it back in some cases. We do get the funding back, but it will come back perhaps in the form or return to us in the form of an infrastructure incentive for us as a department. But that's through the discussion with Provincial Treasury and our department in terms of a potential to spend that money. But there is a process. Also in terms of surrendered funds, my understanding is that will then go back to Cabinet, also in terms of decision making and also together with inputs from the departments in terms of their priorities to deal with that particular aspect as well. I concur with our minister that there are ways and means of how we could have utilized that funds, but sometimes these surrendered funds are restrained given some of the constraints put to us by Provincial Treasury for what for what we can use or whether we can serve funds or not. Which then results in potential, if we can call it, unexpenditure in our case, because we couldn't reprioritize it for other areas as well. Especially around compensation, they put measures in place to say that we should not serve funds from compensation to, say, non-personnel or vice versa. So they do put these constraints on us that forces us to surrender funds to them in that regard. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks very much, Mr. Eli. Any further questions? If there are no further questions, I just want to allow the members of the public, if there are any, to raise questions or point of clarity, if they have any points of clarity or questions. And it looked like by indication, Mr. David, are there any members of the public maybe that you might be aware of?
No, Chairperson. In the participants list, there's no one, Chair. As well, I received no input from the members of the public, Chairperson, although we placed it in the newspapers and also via social media, Chairperson. I received no input from the members of the public.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then I think then if there are no input on that, that means then we can take it that then we have almost come to the end of the meeting, especially of the presentation by the department as well as the Auditor General and also the Audit Committee. Just want to check whether from the Audit Committee, are there any input or issues, members of the Audit Committee or Chairperson, that they would like to raise?
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing else apart from what's already been discussed. Thank you.
Okay. Auditor General.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing further from our side. We are covered adequately. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. HOD.
Chairperson, just from my side to say thank you for the engagement and for the questions. It's always a pleasure to engage both with the Standing Committee but also with SCOPA. We take it seriously to manage our financial commitments responsibly and accountably. When we get to the end of a financial year and we've managed it well, we feel satisfied with it. I want to just say again that I am pleased that we have an unqualified financial audit. It's not an easy thing to do, and as I'd indicated before, departments across the country are struggling with it. But again, I'm not also satisfied with the challenges of the predetermined objectives and our inability to revert to a clean audit. I'm convinced that the department is on a path to address the matters, and I hope that very soon the department will again have a fully clean audit, which is no mean task with a 23 or 24 billion rand budget. Thank you for the engagement. Appreciate it from all members. Thank you, Chair.
HOD, if you get a clean audit, how will you feel?
I will feel, thank you for that question, Chair. I will feel that it places a new burden on us to make sure that we sustain it into the next year, knowing the challenges in attaining it.
No, okay. Thank you very much, HOD. Minister?
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, just in closing, I'd also like to thank the committee and yourself for the engagement. I think it's been very constructive and also the manner in which it was conducted. We will obviously always try to improve. We are a department that is not satisfied with anything but the best, and unless we achieve that, then obviously we will continue to try to do so. But yes, I think it is still a huge achievement to have done even what we have done. It's really important. The most important thing really is that we deliver services, but that we don't steal money or waste money. And I don't believe we've been found to have done any of that. So I'm very happy with that. And also just to thank the Audit Committee. I omitted to do that earlier. Sorry about that, Mr. Buick. Thank you to all of you for your ongoing engagements, holding the department accountable, but also assisting us in ensuring that we improve our systems. And also to the AG, I've known Ms. Adams since my days in council when I sat on the first Municipal Accounts Committee. So we've also come a long way, and we continue to have also, constructive discussions with the AG as well. So thank you to all of you. And I just want to thank my team and for all the work they do, Mr. Eli and all of the finance team. They really are excellent. And lastly, but not leastly, just to wish my HOD, it's his last appearance before Scopa, before he retires in March. So thank you, HOD, also for all your leadership and for the incredible work you've done during the last year, particularly. Mr. Eli and yourself have had a monumental task trying to get supply chain things happening during full-blown lockdown to ensure our schools were back and so on. So I think it's been a huge achievement, and I think you can have a happy retirement knowing that you really delivered your best for this people of this province. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. How will you feel with a clean audit?
Obviously, we like a clean audit, but we do know that sometimes it's not always easy to do when you are delivering services. So it's always a bit of a difficult argument to have. Do we go for a clean audit at every expense, or do we? I mean, for me, the most important thing is to deliver services as efficiently as possible and make sure we don't steal money or waste money. So obviously, we would like a clean audit, but we also do realize that clean audit really is the only. I think South Africa is the only country where clean audit is a thing. Most of other countries, I think they just have unqualified. So, I mean, that is something we're aiming for, but the most important thing for me is that we spend our money wisely, that we do it in good faith, and that we don't steal it. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I see, Honorable Said, I see your hand is down now because I want to round up now. We are rounding up.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to also thank the head of department for his work in the department and for his work in the education space over all of these years, Chair. And I was hoping that you could also reiterate that on behalf of the committee here today. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Said. Thank you very much to the audit committee led by Mr. Big, and also thank you very much to the Auditor General led by Mrs. Sharon. Both the audit committee and the Auditor General are actually our trusted and dependable ally on this drive of wanting to bring about good governance and therefore accountability. So we are always very grateful at the work that they are doing, and also for always being available when we actually want them on meeting of this nature. And we hope that then they will continue to be available whenever we are actually needing them. We thank them very much for their presence here and also for their input as well. To the minister, thank you once again for being available to come to the meeting. This is highly appreciated. And as well to the HOD, Mr. Skruder, as was indicated that it might be your last meeting. Thank you very much. Your input is valued very much. And also the work that we have actually been doing is highly appreciated. I know it has not been an easy thing to, as it's indicated that it's an annual report. It's actually the work that has been done right throughout the year. It is not normally easy. Thank you to you and also the team that is actually assisting you. Now, when we actually invite departments to this meeting of this nature, it's not for purposes of actually scrutinizing or actually wanting to catch them out. It's really trying to assist them in their drive of actually advancing service delivery to actually do that role and responsibility better. It will be good next time when we are sitting here again, we can only be talking about clean audit, and obviously it's one of the things that is there, that is required by the laws of the country that we must comply with. Obviously, it's a greatest achievement that any department can have. So hopefully by the next time when we will be meeting, we will have actually improved from that. Thank you very much to all of you. And I would like to release you now so that we can continue with the work formalities of the committee. Thank you very much. You can be excused.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
For everyone's kind words as well. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Best of luck to all of you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Pleasure, pleasure, pleasure.
Nkosi Sihlalo.
Hayi uyaphi wena ngo?
Awundicinga siyaphuma nathi.
Wankozisa nawe. Oh, sorry. No, I'm seeing Honorable Nkondlo saying that also. Thank you as well. But really, what we need is the members of the committee as well as alternative members. If they want to stay, they are welcome to actually stay so that we can get to our resolutions. And any member of the legislature. Now, I want us, honorable members, to get to the resolution, if there are any that you think that we must actually take on the department. And I see Honorable Bartman's hand is up, and I see Honorable Said's hand is also up. Honorable Bartman.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to make propose 2 resolutions based on previous recommendations that we've heard. The first is that we recommend that the Education Standing Committee has a session regarding the indicators in this department that is set by national, as well as how do the indicators get set in general. It's obviously a recommendation to the Education Committee. However, it would be wonderful if the Education Committee could also then invite us as SCOPA as well to attend it. But that is a recommendation, first one, if that would be okay. And the second recommendation would be based on the process of surrendered funds. I would like to recommend that the Budget Committee has then a session on the process that is undertaken before money is surrendered and how the surrendered fund process works, and then also then invite the SCOPA committee to also be part of that session by Provincial Treasury. Thank you, Chairperson.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Honorable Bartman. Honorable Said.
Chair, thank you. I think I've been covered a little bit by Honorable Bartman on the issue of having a meeting with the Auditor General and the department on the setting of targets. But I want to say it must be on the setting of targets, monitoring, and how to strengthen the department in terms of them ensuring that they adhere to some of the targets. But a discussion about the targets, I think that can be a separate meeting. And if the Committee on Education can also be invited to that particular meeting. Also, can we also ask the department to give us the total amounts that have been surrendered each year since 2014? Just wanted that. And then my third one, because we couldn't discuss it here, I think a meeting with the Auditor General and the department concerning the latest report by the Auditor General on the department's spending on PPEs during COVID-19. But I'll also be writing to you in this regard as well, Chairperson, formally, but I'm just raising it.
Thank you very much, Honorable Said. Honorable Maseko.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I just want to find out the resolutions that Member Barnard has indicated that we should maybe ask the department, the Standing Committee of Education. I know usually the practice is our resolutions from SCOPA for the indicators. I was thinking that if we do that for the SCOPA, that is our resolution to engage so that those indicators we can be informed about them, so that when we do the annual reports already we know what is anticipated, what is it that is all about that the department has put in place for us to do an oversight, rather than pushing that to the Standing Committee of Education, while they also have the maybe during the annual report things that they put in place. I'm just afraid that maybe it might be lost in the system if we don't take ownership of doing that, while we see it's important that we engage to that effect, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Thank you very much, Honorable Maseko. Can we make it because the rule do allow us to make it, we can make it even a joint meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts as well as the Committee of Education. I really don't have a problem with that.
That will be great if we initiate and invite the Department of Education, the Standing Committee of Education.
Come again, Honorable, let me get it clear.
No, I'm saying that I agree with you. We can initiate that engagement and invite the Standing Committee of Education to join us when we do that, Chair.
No, excellent. I saw before I give Honorable Said, I see you want to come back, but I saw Honorable Bottas' hand was up, or has it been covered, Honorable Bot?
Chair, thank you. I've been covered.
Thank you very much.
I'm also covered by Honorable Maseko.
Thank you very much. Now, I think Honorable David, you've captured the resolution.
Yes, Chairperson, everything has been captured, Chairperson.
Okay. I see Honorable Maseko want another bite.
Yes, Chair. I saw on the book just now, I closed my book, the issue that was reported on of the deviations. Can we, when we get engagement, also have an indication to what an extent the deviations can be allowed? I know the policy is there about the deviation, but when you look at the irregular expenditures and that, you see somewhere deviation have allowed that, and it falls on the irregular expenditure. Sometimes it's on the wasteful expenditure. So I know the policy is there, but I'm trying to, if you can help me, members or the procedural officer with your right English, to say how can we engage that it's permissible to what an extent without hiding behind a policy that allows that to happen. For example, if you have the deviation, you can break it down to allow the total amount that is acceptable, and it don't be something that is wrong. But you'll find that sometimes you get a service that needs about, let's say example, 1 million, and the official will break it down to allow that to fall under the deviation, whereas they knew that they're going to need that service. They should have planned so that it can have a bidding that is honest, that the tender can be out. So I'm just trying to find out, because if we can go back, I will just send the information to you, Chair, from the annual report, so that you can see what I mean, that how is that controlled without the manipulation of using the deviation to accommodate that delinquency that can happen to that effect.
It's actually the abuse of the deviation process, really.
Yes.
I see, I get you. Thank you very much. I think Mr. Davids has actually captured that very well. Now, I think in the absence of further resolution, I think we have captured almost everything. I think we are all in agreement with the resolution that has been raised. That therefore means that we are unanimous on the adoption of this resolution. Is there any violent objection to that effect? If there is none, that means that then we have actually adopted the resolution, and it therefore brings us to the end of the meeting. May I make use of this opportunity to thank all of you members for making yourself available to attend the first SCOPA meeting for the year. And then also knowing that this is just the beginning, it's going to be a very hectic week, as we'll be having a lot of this meeting. And I think we'll be meeting again, we'll be seeing each other again at 2 o'clock on the annual report of the human settlement. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks.